Thank you to Ahmad Elbayoumi from polycorner.ca, new Substack focusing on Queen's Park politics. Thank you for taking the time from your schedule to come on today to talk about the recent Liberal AGM.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Great, great. Um, Roland and I have been wanting to talk with somebody about this. We're glad that you were one of the few on the ground reporters to cover this. Most because, as faithful listeners know, Roland and I are former Liberals ourselves, and we kind of have an insider baseball knowledge of what goes on there. But we did not attend because we are no longer Ontario Liberal Party members. So, Ahmed, why don't you tell us what we missed and paint the picture for us and our listeners, if you can, please.
Right, so let's start December of last year. Bonnie Crombie was elected leader of the Ontario Liberal Party, and shortly after, she did promise that she would have, within her first year, a policy convention where Liberals from across the province would gather, essentially to discuss policy and just to re-energize the base, to rally her troops. And so the party set September 20th, 21st, and 22nd to be the AGM dates in London, Ontario. Party members gathered at the RBC place for 3 days, essentially three very long days, I would say, to discuss and to listen to different policy experts and consult on different policies ahead of the possible next early election, and we can talk a bit more about that. So essentially, on Friday, it was, more of an introduction to folks, for folks to, gather. There were hospitality suites in the evening, hosted by various groups. They heard, I believe, from the interim leader, John Fraser, or the former interim leader, John Fraser, among other speakers. And then on essentially various policy consultations held throughout. There was an education policy session with the leaders of the four major teachers' unions. I'm told that that's the first time ever of a Liberal convention that the leaders of the four teachers' unions actually gathered at a Liberal Party event, in this capacity, which is something new for the party. Of course, as you know, the party's relationship with the teachers' unions, with the education's unions, um, had been, hurt by the policies that were implemented under both Dalton McGuinty and Kathleen Wynne. We heard from former British Columbia Premier Christy Clark. We heard from Jane Philpott, who is a former federal cabinet minister. Um, Essentially, various policy consultations throughout the day, and then we heard from the Liberal leader at the end of the day about her plans for the next election. She unveiled a new slogan. She unveiled a new logo for the party, and that essentially was what we saw happen over the course of the 3 days, policy and preparing for the next election, whenever it is.
Yeah, I'll just looks like we've lost. Joe's having computer problems at the moment. It looks like we've lost him for a
All
second,
good.
but he'll return. So we'll just carry on in the meantime. Your article, I thought, raised some interesting points. I mean, like you say, the lead was literally, as you put it under the lead. A lot of people don't know what to feel, and that there's some I mean, just in the people you mentioned, do sort of guess there. I mean, sure, that's great. I dare say, to see the teachers' unions there, from the perspective of the party. But Christy Clark, I mean, yeah, BC Liberals, but is a BC Liberal really a Liberal? I remember back in the day, it's like they have all their graphics are blue, which I
Right.
always found very strange. And it's like, is that not kind of signifying that move to the right of the party that I would imagine is going to leave a lot of rank and file members feeling a bit queasy at best?
Yeah, I think Bonnie Crombie's team has very much been trying to distance itself, to distance the party from the federal party. They understand that Justin Trudeau is a drag on the party. His unpopularity is a drag on the provincial party. And as one source put it, and I know that this quote irked some progressives, essentially, Bonnie Crombie cannot form government until Justin Trudeau is gone as prime minister. That is what one Liberal told me. And that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to really portray this as a new Liberal Party, as a party that has nothing to do, or um, that is different from the federal party. And that's what we saw in the choices of the guests that were there. Christy Clark, who called on Prime Minister Trudeau to quit, said that he should step down. She's also, I will tell you, actively organizing for her own federal bid. Once Mr. Trudeau is gone, we saw her mingling at the Young Liberal hospitality suite on Saturday night. Right before that, the night before, she was at the OREA, the Ontario Real Estate Association's hospitality suite. So she's really trying to get to know folks and make connections on that front. Jane Philpott, the same thing. She was a federal cabinet minister who got kicked out of caucus for speaking out on the SNC-Lavalin scandal. So again, very much trying to move from that party, that notion that they are the federal party or that they are the Kathleen Wynne party. Bonnie Crombie's trying to put her own fingers on this party.
It's funny, isn't it? I mean, they obviously clearly feel that, and geez, they're the experts, not me. But I question it. I question whether the right Ontario Liberal leader can't differentiate themselves fairly easily. I'm thinking back to the days not that long ago. We had the Chrétien and Martin government federally reaching the end of their time, heading towards organizing. Then we had the Michael Ignatieff years where the federal party was in deep, deep trouble. And throughout that, the provincial Liberals were doing great. They were winning elections. And there was always this talk of, we're getting dragged down by the feds and stuff. But then we go and win another election. And maybe it's different. They were in government rather than out of government. And yeah, I accept that. But I kind of think it's a bit weak. I don't know. I mean, it's obviously there's a clear feeling, but I find it very disappointing that their solution to that is to kind of throw the feds under the bus, so to speak. I mean, sure, Justin Trudeau, maybe his time to go and all that, but it's like, if you're liberal, you're liberal. If you're progressive, you're progressive. Just worry about keeping your own house in order. I mean, did you meet any sort of members who shared any of those opinions?
Kathleen Wynne, for one, shared that
Right.
opinion.
Wow.
I sat down with her on Saturday for an interview that we did at a Polycorner event in London, and she essentially told me, if we are liberals, we carry the liberal values and the liberal brand. We don't throw each other under the bus. And yes, I understand where you come from, but I think it is more so not the idea that the federal Liberal Party is a drag, but that the liberal brand is a drag on the Liberal Party. And as weird as it sounds, you look at other provinces and see where the Liberal parties are at. British Columbia, the BC Liberals had to fold their own party because of the unpopularity, and now we have the British Columbia Conservatives, neck to neck with the NDP. This is I think a pattern.
Didn't they rebranded, and then
Right.
having rebranded, they then went far worse downhill, didn't they? Isn't that what I don't
Sure.
remember that right? It was
Sure,
like it was a
100%.
terrible mistake.
Yeah, no, 100%.
I just want to chime in on that. Maybe to get a sense of what some of the people on the ground were saying, but I found that push of we need to counteract, like Doug Ford is trying to position Bonnie Crombie as a carbon tax politician, and rather than combat it with her own narrative, I find that the lineup of the AGM was about trying to distance themselves from the federal party, distance themselves from Trudeau and what. I mean, the fact that as you said, they had Christy Clark who has federal ambitions, and she's probably there doing a little bit of networking for Ontario. Jane Philpott, who infamously was removed from Trudeau's caucus. It's just everything about it just screamed like, okay, I need to tell everyone that I'm trying to redefine myself from not what Doug Ford says, right? It's like an answering Doug Ford's claims rather than trying to define herself. And I was just wondering, did anybody on the ground have that kind of perspective or that sense of where the party weekend was going?
I don't know that people took it as that they're trying to respond to Doug Ford by distancing. I think people took it as they understand where the party is federally, and they understand that this will probably translate into provincial losses. That's, I think, the general scope of things. But when it comes to defining herself from Doug Ford, or sorry, defining herself before Doug Ford is able to do that, uh, people acknowledge that the carbon tax, the Queen of the Carbon Tax ads, for example, they are somewhat working. People are seeing them, people are hearing about them. I don't think people, though, believed there, or the vast majority of people I spoke to there believed that the Liberal Party and the team around Crombie are doing enough to actually define herself. I don't think they believe that what they did that weekend necessarily will translate to people, the general electorate saying, hey, Bonnie Crombie isn't that type of person they're saying she is. People think that the party is not doing enough to define her. And that's actually one of the things that people have been complaining about, that there's not proactive messaging and that they're letting the Conservatives do it for them.
The other in your column that we'll have again in the show notes for listeners, what got me was the sense of a general division at the AGM, that there wasn't that sense of unity going into what's potentially a springtime election in Ontario. For an example I want to highlight was changes to the Constitution that would limit the number of young Liberals sitting on the provincial council, and then the creation of an Ontario Liberal Seniors Commission, which both those points kind of generate a bit of I'm trying to think of the right term. I guess I don't want to say controversy, but just contention, I guess, on the convention floor. And I'm wondering, could you maybe just go into that a bit for our listeners, a little bit more in detail?
Yeah, I think no doubt after the or during the leadership race that happened last year, there was a lot of it was a fight. There was a fight between the folks who supported Crombie and the folks who supported Nate, for example, Nate Erskine-Smith, who took a much more he took more of the progressive wing of the party, who supported him. I will say that what we saw with the constitutional amendments, as I was telling you, the media were not allowed in the room, understandably so. But coming out of that session, a lot of folks spoke to me about what happened, and I can tell you a bit more about the youth amendments, the young Liberal amendments. Essentially, the party wanted to cut the number of young Liberals who sit on the provincial council. I believe it was from 12 to 6. I'm not 100% sure on that number, so don't quote me. But what happened was that the constitutional amendments, as they're proposed, are proposed in packages. So you either vote for all of them or you vote for none of them. The Young Liberals essentially voted for that package on changing governance structure. They voted against it because of that amendment. And that caused a lot of controversy on the floor. Two of the folks on Crombie's inner circle spoke in favor of the amendment, and then Young Liberals spoke against the amendment, and they essentially whipped their vote. So all the Young Liberals on the floor voted against. And a lot of people in the room were unhappy with that. I can't give you the exact quote, but I had a handful of Young Liberal sources speak to me about different, name call things that were said to them. Someone said to one that these little kids think that they can control us, or they control the party or something like that. So in that sense, yeah, going into this convention, I was expecting to see much more unity amongst folks. Again, people don't know what to feel. They, on one hand, are eager to support Bonnie Crombie, but on another hand, they feel that what they've seen from the leaders team and the leader over the last year hasn't been sufficient, especially if we're going for an early election.
And it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, my memory of previous leadership elections, I wasn't around the party so long that my institutional memory goes back to more than about 20 I don't know, first leadership election I went to, I guess, was the Win leadership election, fairly recent in the history of the party, I guess. But it did seem that after leadership elections, the Ontario Liberals were very good at saying, okay, that's over. This is the leader now. We're going to back them, come what may. And if a defeated candidate didn't like that, then they would have the decency to sort of get off the field and disappear. It seems like that's not entirely what's happened this time. That there's still the kind of Nate or Yasanakvi camps are still kind of there. Maybe talking about, is that fair, or is that my imagination?
Not in an official term. They're not still there in an official term, but I still do think that these groups are still intact, as in different coalitions within the party. Yeah.
I mean, and the party's always been a broad church, right? There's always been
Sure.
the more blue liberal wing and the more red liberal wing, or orange liberal wing, maybe. Which, so that's fair. So, I mean, there's nothing new there, maybe, but yeah, I find it interesting. And I mean, traditionally, those kind of constitutional sessions were, it was sort of at breakfast time on Sunday. Everybody was too hungover to go to them. No one really cared. No one knew what happened at them, frankly, quite often. So it's odd to hear of these being kind of like fairly heated in what was being discussed. It's strange. Maybe we shouldn't read too much into it, but I mean, certainly there's been basically there's been two by-elections now. The Liberals have lost both of them, and it wasn't exactly close, right? Unless I'm mistaken.
Bay of Quinte was
that
close.
Right?
The most recent one, Bay of Quinte, was a fairly close call, but I mean, it's a Tory blue seat traditionally. So, but again, they weren't able to push over the top. So there is that.
Let me chime in there actually on Bay of Quinte, because the pretext here is that the Liberals gathered the day after the Bay of Quinte by-election loss. That, I think, went into the idea of people don't know how to feel. The party was going into this race really optimistic about their chances in Bay of Quinte. There was polling that had them, I believe, neck and neck with the Conservatives. And their candidate was a relatively strong local candidate in Sean Kelly, a radio broadcaster who people know there, who people recognize, a voice people know. So people going out of that were questioning, where did we go wrong? Like, where did the party go wrong in that sense? Some will say that it was, the Conservatives, they've held this seat forever, and people are still supportive of Doug Ford's team there. But again, other people were saying that, Bonnie Crombie has not done enough to define herself, so that when she goes up north into rural communities and into remote communities, people are seeing a leader who can actually take on Doug Ford, and not a leader who is going to give them more of the same from what the federal party is giving them. Keep in mind, Bay of Quinte is a conservative riding federally. So that pretext, I think, is interesting when it comes to that. And I was going to speak a bit about the constitutional amendments because, Roland, you were talking about that sense of division, but we can chime in. We can talk about that after if you'd like.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, so or maybe speak some more about that. I mean, there were a couple of motions that were, I mean, technically these motions always come from would generally come from the sort of party executive or a committee that's been set up. By the time any kind of motion like that gets to the floor, in my experience, it has, you don't get to the vote unless there's a good chance that it's going to pass, right? Because no one wants to kind of humiliate themselves by losing. And yet a couple of fairly significant amendments were voted down. Perhaps you could talk some more about those.
Yeah, so the governance structure amendment essentially did not pass, and that was going to enact changes to the provincial council and the executive council, I believe. And again, I was told that this vote was very close, but because the Young Liberals essentially whipped their vote, it did not pass, and people did not, the party, I was told, did not take it easy. Keep in mind that the constitutional amendment session took place at 8 a.m. on Saturday morning. So again, like you're saying, people were hungover, people were, tired from staying up all night like the night before. But as one source put it to me, the party did not expect that the kids would wake up and be organized at 8 a.m. That's how one person put it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and that's what it was. There was a surprise amongst folks about the fact that the amendment did not pass.
And really, it was a vote, if I understand correctly, and correct me if I'm not right, it was a vote to sort of decrease the influence of the young liberals and increase the influence of senior liberals. Is that right?
So actually the establishment of a seniors commission was another part of the amendment package. So it was multiple sections that they voted on. The one that included a change to the governance structure that decreased the amount of young liberals, that was not passed. The seniors commission one was passed though, and I believe
Okay.
it was passed without support from the young liberals. And I asked a few folks in the party as this vote was happening, and when I got word that the seniors commission vote did pass, I was like, why do they need a seniors commission? Or why is it such a controversial issue here? Like the federal party has it, and the party talked about how it's been successful on a federal level at mobilizing older folks. And someone pointed at the room and was like, look inside the room and tell me if we need more seniors representation.
Well, I can jump in on that and just say that
Yeah.
like I have been in that room when people ask like, why don't we have a seniors? We should have a seniors commission. And the running joke was the entire party is a seniors commission. Like if you go to any riding association in any corner of this province, the majority of the executive of a riding association, the majority of the volunteers are all retirees. Because that's what you do.
Yeah.
You retire, you have nothing to do. I'll go help out the local riding association. So there was always this kind of joke of no, the party itself is pretty much a seniors commission. Like what
terms of yeah, I mean in terms of just sorry, Ahmed, just to sort of throw some more of our kind of background in and to give a picture of these kind of events to anybody who's never been to one, and this would apply to pretty much any party, I suspect.
Right.
I think it maybe applies a little bit more to the Liberals sometimes because they are perceived as of the centre. That you don't get the people who are like young and extreme who go to one end or the other of the scale. You get the moderates, but I still think it applies to pretty much any party. But yeah, I mean, like older people have got the time, and also when it talks about these kind of events, they're quite expensive to go to, even though you've got to travel, you've got to get accommodation. It's a few $100s. I mean, back in the day, it was I don't know, $400 or $500 to go to the AGM, something like that. I don't know what it is now. A lot more if you're a journalist. I know that.
Journalists go for free.
Oh, really? Oh, really? Oh,
yeah,
wow.
journalists.
Okay.
That's changed.
That's interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
We need to look into that. Or free booze at the receptions, I shouldn't joke about that, but it certainly was a feature back in the days. But yeah, I mean, I was a youngster. Here I am in my mid-50s. I was a youngster as someone who went to these things in my sort of late 40s. I felt like one of the younger people in the room. The only other young people were generally the political staff, who largely don't exist anymore because they all lost their jobs when the government lost office. It was the paid staffers who were the people people like Joel, who were able to go, but are also under the age of 45, 50. So it's, yeah. I mean, the influence of seniors on politics, full stop, is massive. But it is also true that they also vote more consistently and more predictably than the other demographic, I guess. So it's I guess I see both sides of the argument. Yeah. Anyway, that was just a sort of setting the picture comment, really, rather than a comment per se. But I mean, so they set up the seniors commission, which I guess, I mean, this was branded as a policy convention.
Yes.
My memory of whenever the party talked about getting the members to contribute to policy was that it was it was an engagement tool, right? It's a way to get people involved because people join parties because they want to talk about politics. In reality, the last thing you generally want are a self-selecting group of seniors, again, forming your policy for you. You need experts, specialists, people who work in fields to develop your policy, not a bunch of 60, 70, 80-year-olds from who knows where who turn up, did you feel that it was a real policy convention in terms of what was being discussed?
Well, in the sense of policy, there were no policy votes or policy plenaries like they normally have at a policy convention. So the agenda for what will be on the platform next year was not set, or in 2 years if we go in 2026, that was not set. But yes, in terms of consultation, I would say this was definitely a policy consultation. We heard from Jen Keesmaat, who spoke about housing. She was the former Toronto mayoral candidate and once the city planner. And Jen Keesmaat actually, I walked into the room, there was no seats. It was a standing room and it was a big, massive hall. In the front row was Bonnie Crombie sitting, listening to Keesmaat and Adil Shamji, who is the housing critic for the party. Same with education again. And like I mentioned off the top, the fact that the teachers' unions were there, it was a signal, and the party was telling us, and the teachers' unions were on, on background, folks in the sector were telling us that the fact that the teachers' unions are now willing to engage with the Liberals is a sign that there is a change in that relationship. So we did hear from the teachers' unions about the need for collaboration with the party. We heard from healthcare workers as well. Jane Philpott spoke about health policy, healthcare policy, and the need to rebuild the system. So yes, definitely. If it wasn't if we had to talk, give it a name, I would call it a liberal policy consultation.
That sounds that fits with my experience of these things, and
yeah.
It's a way to get people to go to the convention to say, hey, you're going to be consulted on policy. Oh, great. We'll pay up at $500 or whatever. And I don't want to rain on the parade too much. Well, however, the Ontario Liberal Party, in essence, does not consult on policy with its own members, if I'm truly honest about it.
I'm going to counter your claim there, because I know for a fact they have.
Okay.
No, I don't need to forget. They did a policy convention in Collingwood, and that was a big you had people like Malcolm Gladwell and other experts in a variety of
was that one?
Yeah.
I saw it was window dressing.
Well, no,
that's not fair. Maybe I'm wrong.
That was a big one, and that was the I think that's what people are expecting from in terms of a policy convention. Now maybe that there might be time to do that, but maybe I don't know if Doug Ford does call an early election in the springtime. I don't know if that's going to be feasible, but to kind of bring it back to the general attitude, generally these party conventions, these AGMs, they're like a bit of a coalition, rally around the leader, let's be unified. We're proud to be either Liberals, NDP, Ontario Progressive Conservatives, whatever the case may be. And we're getting ready, especially kind of leading into what looks like it will be a contentious spring. Will they be going, or will they not be going?
To say the least.
Well, to say the least, there's a kind of a gun to the head kind of atmosphere in Ontario politics. Are we going to go or are we not? It's entirely up to Doug Ford to make that decision. So that being said, as we said, from what I read in your article and putting in context, so Milton was a big loss for the Liberals. Bay of Quinte was a big loss. That could have been a huge get, and they didn't push over the top. And then this AGM happens, and rather than, all right, let's rally around the leader, solidify our base. This is who we are. This is what we're about. It kind of got the sense of people came out adrift. There's not that real sense of camaraderie. And is that an accurate perception of what the outcome, by Sunday as everybody leaves, that's what the feeling on the ground was?
Yeah. So on the first night I arrived, I spoke with a few sources, and one of the sources were telling me essentially Bonnie Crombie came into the party as a retail politician who was going to be a challenge and a threat to Doug Ford. And we see that the premier is very much concerned about her. He will randomly talk about her at press conferences and say that she's been saying no to building highways, no to building tunnels, no to lowering taxes. So in that sense, yes, she's been a threat. But what folks have been telling me and what I've been hearing is people feel that she has not really translated that retail politician style, that I'm going to be the clear alternative that scares off Doug Ford and people are going to, rally around me. And people were echoing that at the convention. People I've spoke to privately, at least, were echoing that, there's still a lot of work to be done, but as it's been over the last 10 or 11 months, she's not done what she said she would do during the leadership race. Granted, the party's been was decimated in the last election and the election before that. But we did see from her an attempt to start to define herself. We saw the new slogan come out, "More for You." She gave a very big rally speech in which she took on Doug Ford. Someone said the gloves are coming off. She gave an impersonation of the premier in her speech, among other things. So in that sense, yes, but I don't know that people were actually unified around her. Christy Clark's speech was very much a "let's get around Bonnie" speech, not more so what's next for the party.
And I just find that's a funny position to be in going into a potential election. Roll and I are old hacks at this, and usually these things are, the idea is like we all get together and talk about how great we are, and we're such fantastic politicos, and get rah rah rah. We're going to get ready and whatnot. And I don't get the sense of that from the liberals. Like I'm kind of bring this into contrast is the NDP, the other progressive party, most recently, they're putting Marit Stiles is finally putting out ads
Yes.
into the public sphere, and I thought, they're not bad ads, and I think it's what you want your leader to do, to start saying, this is who I am, this is what I stand for, take a look at me. And we've yet to see that. I mean, Bonnie Crombie's been on there for about 2 years now, coming up on 2 years, and we've yet to see that style of definition taking place in the public sphere. I mean, a lot of times we've been asking over the summer, like, where has Bonnie been? And Merit to a lesser extent. Merit finally looks like she's stepping up to the plate, which is good for the NDP and good for Merit. But I'm astounded that this is not the case with the Ontario Liberals, especially coming off of convention.
Bonnie's team will tell you, Bonnie Crombie's team will tell you if and will tell me that look in Mississauga, the Liberal team was Deepika Damerla, who had Tom Allison, and there was Alvin Tedjo, who had Darren MacArthur, who is Bonnie Crombie's de facto chief of staff. Look at Mississauga. They still came back together into the Liberal tent, and I think that this is what they will tell us, that the party may right now have some differences. There might be internal, rumblings, but at the end of the day, Bonnie Crombie will put out ads. They are starting to put out ads. Bonnie Crombie will start to define herself. She will have a riding where she's going to win, or they hope she will win. And at the end of the day, the Liberals from all different parties, all different groups will come together when the next election comes to help her win and become premier. I don't know that it's going to actually be a challenge when election time comes for her. I think right now it's just people are concerned about the direction, and so they're talking. But I don't know that that translates into what we'll see from the party in 2025 or 26.
It's certainly very difficult, to be fair to all political leaders. But you would think in provincial politics it's not that hard to get attention, but it actually is. Provincial politics is so far down the list from federal politics on the general public's kind of radar that just getting into the news is a massive challenge. And that's the one thing that I would say that I learned during my sort of time, that we would constantly say, like, we need to be doing more to get into the media. And it's like, you can go out every day and go and you can do a huge amount and still basically not make a ripple in the kind of media landscape, and because people are still talking about whatever's happening in Ottawa this week.
Right.
So it is a challenge, and suddenly when the writ drops, everything changes, and all of a sudden people will pay attention. And so to an extent, you just can't tell until the writ drops what's going to happen.
I would argue though, like the premier is in front of a microphone every single day, and this was a criticism that folks had for both Bonnie and Marit. Where were they over the summer? The premier has made, I would say, or I can count at least 3 announcements in the last week of policies that he wants to implement, things that will probably go into a campaign if there were an early spring election. He's promised to increase the speed on highways. He's promised to build a tunnel under the 401. So the premier is out constantly putting out his messaging, telling people that he's there, he's working for them, he's getting it done. The opposition parties have not been doing that. And they have the opportunity and they have the ability to do that. I think if the opposition parties wanted to put out proposals that were bold, that were, that would catch people's attentions, like the premier is doing with building a tunnel under the 401, they would be able to do that. They haven't.
It's no, I mean we've talked about this, and I think you're absolutely
Well,
right. I was trying to be as charitable as possible, but but it's almost in the current political world, it's almost better to be, bring out bad policy. It doesn't matter. You still got a headline. It's better to have a headline. Almost, publicity is good publicity.
We brought up is that in this day and age, there's nothing stopping you from putting out a TikTok or a short video saying, "Hey, I'm Joel McLeod. I'm going to cut your taxes by 50% for the lowest earners in the province," or whatever, right? Something like that. You just sell that, because like him or love him, or sorry, like him or hate him, Pierre Poilievre has mastered the retail politics, quick, pithy messaging, and it's captured people's attention. Clearly, it's working, whether you like it or not. And I question, are the Liberals and the NDP playing from an outdated playbook? Are they playing from this kind of stuff? We have to wait till the media pays attention to us. That works in the early 2000s. In this day and age, with so much social media out there, so much people looking for, because I think people are looking for attention. They're looking for that information. They're looking for something to grab onto. If you just sit there, okay, well, I'll just wait for the election. I'll wait till that's when people are going to pay attention. I don't think that's the case anymore.
Yeah. Alvin Tedjo, let's recall what happened in Mississauga. When the Mississauga mayoral race started, Alvin Tedjo was an unknown commodity in the city. And he was just putting TikTok after TikTok after TikTok out about how, "Hi, I'm Alvin Tedjo and I want to build transit. Hi, I'm Alvin Tedjo and I want to freeze taxes." And he placed second, and he came a close second to Carolyn Parrish at the end. So in that sense, I think that the parties need to start looking at their messaging and how they're communicating with folks. There is a broad subsection of young people, and I'm being one of them, who don't really see the leaders and the politicians on social media. Whereas I'm seeing Doug Ford on 6Buzz on Instagram every day because of some, shiny proposal that he's put out, like the 401, or like increasing increasing speed on the highway, right? So there's active messaging on one side, not really active messaging on the other, and I would say there is bold ideas, like when it comes to reaching younger folks on one side. We have not seen that from the other side.
It's that outdated playbook thing again. And I grew up in an era when the smart thing to do in politics was to not have policy, because policy scared people off. That's not the way it is anymore. It's like you've got to grab people's attention, and it's like, yeah, we're going to build a tunnel. It's going to cost $200 billion. Yay! Headlines. And even if it's a dumb idea, you're still sucking up the media oxygen, so to speak. And that's what the Fords have been good at. That's what the Trumps have been good at. That's what, to be honest, Poilievre is good at. And the Progressive Party's just aren't getting it yet. The old rules are over, it seems to me.
I think someone once told me Bonnie Crombie is what Bonnie Crombie's team is doing right now is trying to be the "we're not Doug Ford" party, but
Yep.
you have to be a party that's actually proposing an alternative to the premier,
Yep.
not just not being Doug Ford. But look, at the end of the day, she was the mayor of Mississauga. She was a very popular mayor in Mississauga, and I think she's banking on name recognition in the 905 and in Toronto. And I think as we start, like again, to be fair to her, she's had 10 months and the party's, had to rebuild infrastructure, had to raise a lot of money. So in 10 months, she's done that work. The party will tell you, she's been in ridings, meeting with folks and having those, smaller conversations. But now I think the party is going to have to transition, and this is what I heard from folks on Crombie's team at the AGM. Now is the transition to now introducing Crombie on a more bigger scale. You're going to see her advertisements now on television and radio and on social media about who she is, her story, how she grew up. But when it comes to policy, it might very well be that they decide to run this as, this is what Doug Ford's done. He's being investigated by the RCMP on the Greenbelt. He has this scandal and that scandal and that scandal. We're the alternative. But again, will it work? I don't know. The premier is essentially he's still popular, even though the Greenbelt, he's under investigation, apologized for it and reversed it. So that's a question to ask.
You know what?
Yeah.
Time will have to tell on that one, and you know what? Maybe we'll have you back on in a few months. And we'll see where we stand on that. Who knows what will transpire. But Ahmad, I know you've got a busy schedule ahead of you, and we very much appreciate you taking the time to come on to talk about liberal woes and Ontario politics, and it's always a good topic on this podcast. So thank you very much for coming on.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.